for all of us. It's about predicting where the consumer is going and getting half of it right.
One of the things we want to do is create ads that don't suck.
Embracing change creates great possibility.
I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today.
Today on the show, I've got Nick Horan. He's the Global Brand Experience Lead at Reckitt, and he's focused on driving category growth by translating design into meaningful brand experiences and sustainable innovations. And he shares a ton of examples with us today. He's passionate about using his creativity as an enabler of positive change, and he's part of Reckitt's hygiene and home brand experience team, where he leads on stain removal brand Vanish. Today on the show, we'll talk about the future of brand experience, what it looks like in totality, what it looks like for fast-moving consumer goods categories like Vanish and Reckitt's brands, how he's attacking e-commerce and digital marketing challenge, what physical experience means into delivering actual brand experience, and much more. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Nick Horan. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to this conversation. And it's not every day you get to start a conversation talking about nuclear submarines. So what's your connection to those?
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange one. I'm not going to lie, but I left university with a degree in product design. And so I guess my natural progression was to go into product design. And I was lucky enough to secure a year's worth of work as a junior product engineer for quite an interesting consultancy in Cambridge. And I loved it. I mean, it was wonderful. They had the most bizarre selection of clients. And one of them happened to be a sort of nautical instruments business where I had to design the shell of a device that was ultimately going to sit on the side of a nuclear submarine. So it was kind of used for when they were docking and so forth. Looking back, it was quite a bizarre challenge thinking about it. It's like a combination of human factors design, like stowability. I imagine the spaces that these things go in.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And then, of course, like they're exposed to some pretty extreme conditions. So you can imagine that list of requirements. So, yeah, kind of random, but looking back, super place to cut my teeth. And, there was some other stuff in there, like heart surgery equipment, prototypes for production lines. It was crazy. Put it that way.
That's amazing. I mean, I guess design and product design applies to everything, but you don't think that one place is doing all of those things. That's kind of crazy. Well, let's talk about from those days to where you are now as the brand experience lead for Vanish stain remover at Reckitt. What was your path along the way?
Yeah, I mean, as I'm sure you can imagine by that kind of first question, it's not been a straight path by any means, but I guess how many careers are really. So I did the engineering bit for a while and decided that wasn't entirely for me because I guess they had projects that had the most enormous timelines, so sometimes up to 10 years. And Venice, for very good reason. They had a lot of validation to be done. But I just realized personally I wanted to be in a much faster sector. So I spent a bit of time interning with branding agencies in London on the back of, again, another random project, but a university project where I was rethinking the KFC family bucket. But I fell in love with working on brands, looking at how to enter new spaces, new places, or uncovering a brand's history and bringing that to life through awesome creative. But mainly I was working in that fast-paced environment that I really craved, with actually fantastic creative teams. And I suppose I was afforded the opportunity to build a design studio in Singapore at one point, where we were working predominantly on bringing pretty heritage Scottish whiskey to affluent markets in Asia, as well as things like skincare product innovation. So again, very varied. But I think I went abroad, and when you sort of come home, it forces a little bit of reflection. And I think it was at that point I decided to have real impact on brands. I wanted to make the move in-house. And brand experience encompasses so much from people's psychology, from when they're exposed to a brand for the first time, or how to present a brand in different purchase environments, or shopper behavior, or how a product's used, or digital channels to interact with brands longer term. And I guess with that broad experience from engineering through different markets and creative and different touch points, my skills match quite a few of those challenges, and that's kind of why the brand experience lead for Vanish at Reckitt sort of seemed a natural progression for me and allowed me to move in-house, which was fantastic.
That's awesome. And it does seem like somebody with your background, both engineering and product design and that kind of thing, it would naturally lend itself to brand experience because it combines the human, the physical, all the elements, if you will, I guess.
Yeah, I think as a product designer, you're trained to think not just the thing in front of you, but how it interacts with the world. So, from day one, your training is thinking about a broader set of things that you're designing and not just the artifact itself, for want of a better word.
Yeah. Well, speaking of your role today as brand experience lead, what does that all include at Reckitt?
Yeah, so I did a bit of a calculation the other day with a friend of mine in research, and I calculated that the brand I'm currently looking after, which is Vanish, which is a stain removal brand, it's in 70 odd different countries, but I think we calculated about 12 interactions per second that brand is having. So that's based on kind of cost of product, the amount of sales that we're making, how many media exposures that it has, how regular the product is being used itself. So my role is to set the direction for how we want people to experience the brand across a labyrinth, frankly, of offline and online touch points. So identifying a sort of framework from someone's first exposure of a brand to then advocacy and repurchase. I then sort of enable the organization to deploy great creativity at those touch points and allow that kind of engagement in 70 or so different countries that we're in. So ultimately, it's providing best-in-class creative direction, fantastic creative assets. And then I work part of the global business largely with people like global marketing, insights, research and development teams to bring to life new innovation to those different markets, but also a fair amount of work, in fairness, with our local marketing teams to help them deploy the brand and those innovations. So it's a pretty varied day in the office, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like it. And I mean, the complexity there across all the touch points, 70 plus countries, 12 interactions per second. It both sounds fast and fast.
Fast moving consumer goods, I guess. So putting the F in it.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you think about just the function or discipline of brand experience overall? And I mean, it seems all encompassing, but I'm curious how you think about it.
Yeah, it's a tricky question, but if I take a step back, I keep thinking brands have never really been more personified than they are today. So I'll give you an example. I bought a pair of headphones last year, but I bought them not just because the sound was great. I mean, it was great, but also because of their environmental credentials and based on the materials, its construction and so forth. But also they were giving some of the profits to technologies to develop more technologies for those with hearing impairments, which I just thought was really cool. And then when they broke down, which was a couple of days ago, in fairness, I had a WhatsApp conversation with their brand that sold that headphones. And now, of course, it's a person on the other side, unless it's really fantastic AI, in which case kudos to them, they've got great AI. But that WhatsApp conversation was between me and the brand. It wasn't between me and the customer service person. That the platform they were using, the tone of voice, the ease of which the problem was resolved was the voice of the brand, not an individual. So when I think of brand experience, it's all about being available to have and drive, I suppose, rich conversations with people on whatever media platforms they're most comfortable in, and to build a relationship and to kind of create a community around shared views, wider issues, or just having your headphones fixed. So when I think about brand experience, it's kind of trying to make sure that people have the smoothest, most delightful, most problem-solving experience that somehow also makes them feel engaged with the world around them, and somehow to align their purpose, their core values to that of the brand as well.
I like that example, and interesting how they're solving their own customer support challenges through WhatsApp as well.
That's super smart. And it meant it was all on my own time. I didn't have to sort of sit and listen to green sleeves on the end of a phone and wait 25 minutes and hope it doesn't fall off. It's that sort of thing. It's great. Super smooth.
Awesome. Well, so as you think about it, how does what you just described in brand experience and bringing that to life, how does that translate if you will, to your category, fast moving consumer goods?
I think, I'll be honest, if I can be, like, I think FMCG is still on that journey, like, as an industry. It comes from a slightly different heritage. That sort of 1950s style advertising where, like, advertising and broadcast was the key to driving purchase. But we're now in an era where we're being exposed to something like 5,000 brands compared to something like 500 brands in the 1950s. So, we can't just rely on TV for brand interactions. Previously, it was about television. Maybe you might come across someone doing a demo in store, or the store clerk recommends a brand.
Right.
And actually, in that time, a brand needed only be a sort of problem solver. If I think I'm being honest, I hope I am. But the world's changed, and with that personification that we were talking about, people expect brands to take a stance on larger societal issues, join cultural discussions. I keep using Nike as a reference, but they're supporting an equal playing field by taking a stance on the American Civil Rights Movement, which is in the 1950s unheard of for a brand to kind of take that sort of position and to align to those sorts of things, because they made trainers, right? Or sneakers. So we're moving to brands being sort of more community focused and turning from broadcast to more conversation expressions and being part of a cultural context. So if I take my brand, Vanish, for example, we want to keep clothes in circulation for as long as possible, because the fashion industry is the second largest contributor to CO2 emissions, and garment waste in landfill is a massive issue. So we're innovating alongside our traditional stain removal credentials and building benefits around other reasons people might discard a garment, such as color protection, hygiene, odor removal. And we've created products that completely revive cotton garments so people can wear them for longer. And we're building our brand experience to create conversations around that impact, so everyone can have an understanding about how changing habits in garment consumption can have a positive impact on broader society. So, in answer to your question, I think we've got a lot to learn in terms of brand experience, and we've got a lot of distance to travel as FMCG. But I'm quite excited about how brands can take a much larger role in that context.
Yeah. No, I love those examples. And the thing I keep thinking about as I think about your category too is just this. It seemed slow at some levels, but I don't think it has been that slow of a basically deconstruction of the historical business model, and recombination of new pieces again in this new world where we've got different new channels for buying goods and services. You've got new ways of buying them, and so shopping in front of the shelf is not maybe as important for certain categories as it used to be. But to your point, FMCG, I think it's been slower to evolve, to adapt to all of those changing dynamics. So kudos to what you're doing at Vanish.
That makes it a cool space to operate in, because there's a good road ahead of you, and a great platform for innovation, to be honest. So it's great.
Well, and I saw some of your work, I guess, from the brand coming to life in terms of how the product Vanish actually works, and it's pretty amazing, frankly.
Thank you.
Some of the rehab, if you will, of old garments, put them back into use, if you will. It's pretty cool. Well, one of the things we just mentioned was new channels, and things like e-commerce is one of those, as well as digital marketing overall. How are you thinking about attacking those two areas as a fast-moving consumer goods brand?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier. So, I mean, first of all, we need to acknowledge that a lot of our products were built for traditional retail, and we're just not really purpose-built for e-commerce. So the main sort of start point for us is to kind of acknowledge that, and to understand that we need to build products for the ground up in e-commerce. So Miracle, which I described earlier, is a one-shot revival for cotton garments, which is pretty cool, e-commerce. But one I'm pretty proud of is our multi-benefit tablets, and it was built from the ground up, so we could ship it in its own container and remove the need for any further packaging around it. It'll fit through the vast majority of letterboxes to avoid people having to sit and wait, or their parcel being delivered outside and sitting in the rain. Probably more of a problem in the EU, to be fair. But the product, it also was a convenient monodose tablet, which appeals to that kind of more e-commerce purchaser preference. And then we generated this really lovely unboxing experience, as well as a whole suite of creative assets for social and e-commerce channels to educate people about the benefit of closed longevity. And we made use of things like QR codes to funnel people to further points of engagement, to things like online calculators that demonstrate the impact of keeping their garments in circulation for longer. So in answer to your question, we're attacking it by building the right products for the people that engage in those channels and trying to consider the digital touch points that sit around it and engage people on our brand so that it's working. So it's kind of working towards the experience that people expect in that channel versus trying to rehash a traditional retail channel mentality and just putting it in e-commerce, because we've seen that it resonates enough, but we can get much more resonance by sort of building from the ground up. And I think it's working. That product is now the number one in the stain removers category in Amazon in the UK, and that's after something like 4 months worth of sale. So making sure that we are designing the right experience and the right touch points for that sort of digital first consumer journey really works. So that's kind of how we're attacking it, and we're thinking about other products and building on that e-commerce first portfolio longer term.
Yeah. I mean, that's an amazing example because it hits on so many different elements that you just described, the eco-friendly benefits, the how it's delivered and the ease at which it comes to your house or wherever you're sending it, the unboxing, the education, the further entrenching people in what you're trying to do as a brand. I mean, I want to see your checklist. How are you designing against all of these elements? I mean, because it's very, very comprehensive.
Yeah, and it starts, I guess, by understanding all the touch points in that journey. And we have some really smart people in the organization, in insights and in media, that understand what the consumption habits are of those users, how they're consuming that media, and then identifying the touch points that will have the most impact for design intervention. And once we understand that, we can then say, okay, well, unboxing experience, for example. What are the kind of key things that are going to deliver absolutely fantastic packaging that deliver an unboxing experience that people will talk about? It was bizarre. I did some research the other day. Just under 50% of people had very kindly written a review or photographed their unboxing experience of Vanish stain remover. And we're not talking again about sneakers here,
right? Or phones or something.
Yeah, exactly. And I was just like, this is amazing. So people do genuinely appreciate it, and I suppose it's a thing of reciprocity. You design something beautiful for them, then they feel obliged to kind of give you a pat on the back, maybe. But anyway, so that was clearly a high value touch point for this project, and we look at other kind of high value touch points and say, okay, these are the things that are going to be heavy hitting, because we can't do everything. As you said, the checklist would be enormous, but being choiceful about at those different moments of truth, at those different moments when people are going through a journey with the brand, making sure the things that really matter to them show up and have the right creative at that point, product design creative, graphic creative, or digital creative, that really drive impact and build relationships with them.
Yeah. I mean, we've been talking about the benefits of the product itself, like the technical aspects of it. We've been talking about just now, like how you're packaging this for the D2C and the e-commerce channel. I'm curious if you have other examples of like physical experience, like packaging and how it plays into the brand experience overall.
Yes. I mean, this is something that I've always taken with me. It was a very wise person who once told me, you can have the best activation in the world, but if your product doesn't perform, then it's wasted money. So building a packaging experience that is intuitive, that coaches, that educates people to get the best performance out of the product so they can be wowed by that performance, is one of the major aspects of physical product packaging and product design that I love. And I'm a product designer at my heart, so that's kind of the spaces that I love to play in. Brand language, of course, plays a part. Human factors to get the most optimum performance is a priority. So I think that's kind of one of the things that I always take with me into any kind of physical design challenge. But in addition, we were talking about digital assets and digital design, there's a really nice opportunity, I think, in bridging the gap between physical and digital experiences and taking people to richer experiences, deeper content, and funneling people to those spaces where they can engage with us as a brand further, whether they're sat on the train going from Washington to New York or whatever else. So we are investing in trying to bridge that gap through the use of connected packs, which in short is putting QR codes on pack and taking people to some sort of digital experience. So that combination of coaching, training, and making sure that they're using the products in the right way, but also enhancing experience by bridging physical and digital is kind of core to, I think, total product experience.
I love that. Love it. And a side note, completely sort of unrelated to what you were just talking about, but like QR codes you come up a couple of times. And I have to admit, like I thought they were going to die, but I think the pandemic breathed new life into QR codes.
Yeah.
But man, how useful are they? Like, and why did we not know this before? Like it's such a shortcut, a short hack in life. And it took a pandemic to revive them, I think. But
yeah, and Apple to make it native in their technologies
that helps.
as well.
That definitely helps. Yeah, exactly.
But
exactly.
No, I agree. I mean, in its rawest form, it's a gateway to kind of ease someone's experience to getting into an online space. And as soon as people start using it, you can see that the kind of levels of adoption are increasing. And as you said, COVID has been a massive catalyst for that.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we've learned, which probably sounds quite obvious, but if you put great content on the other side, people will use it again. If you don't think about what's on the other side of the QR code, then someone's probably not going to engage for a second or third time. So, thinking through what content we want to expose at that point, maybe when someone's got the product in their hand for the first time, or maybe they're a long-term user, lover of our brand, we got to kind of think through those scenarios to make sure that, as I said, what's on the other side of that gate is super compelling.
Yeah. I think that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. And I feel like we owe whoever came up with the QR code like an award or something, because I'm sure they've seen their own ups and downs, thinking that it was going to die a slow death, and then now look where we are. So
exactly,
definitely is the easy button to get you to a gateway to use your word to whatever you're trying to get to next. But where do you see the future of brand experience going? I mean, you're definitely driving it to new places. So I'm curious to get your perspective on the future.
Yeah, it's a subject that sometimes scares me a little bit. We discussed earlier the volume of brand exposures between the 50s and now. That increase from 500 to 5,000 or thereabouts that someone has in their one day, and the amount of channels, places, spaces which brands are engaging is enormous. And there are new platforms, new technologies that kind of continue to emerge. So QR is not necessarily a particularly new one, but it's an emergent one for our space. The metaverse, people keep talking about that as well, and that's a emerging space as well. So I think the future, if I'm honest, is the continuation of the move from broadcast to conversation engagements. So I think it's for brands to slow down a bit, actually, and give people the freedom to engage on their terms, to be available, to be relatable and purposeful when someone wants to engage with you. So in essence, I suppose what I'm trying to describe is moving away from just broadcast to richer, more purposeful engagements. Actually, when I think about it, I don't think we have a choice in moving to that future, because if we keep building the way we are, there are going to be so many brands competing for space and attention that actually you're just not going to be memorable. So having that depth becomes a massively important factor moving forward.
I like that a lot. And a couple of things stick out to me about what you said is that the purposeful, the richness of the engagement or the conversation, because we hear a lot today about personalization, and it feels, I think the essence is right, but the execution a lot of times feels like broadcast fractured.
Yeah.
Like we went from rifle shot to shotguns, like spraying personalization everywhere we can. But it doesn't get to your point, which is like the purposefulness potentially, or the richness of that engagement. I really like the future you're describing.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Personalization was a bit of a adage for a while.
Yeah.
but people were trying to provide personalization without talking to anyone. And
right.
how can you personalize an experience without knowing the individual and how to craft something around them? And that is the definition of personalization.
Right.
It's more than just offering to, I don't know, stitch someone's initials on a collar.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this has been fun to talk about what you're doing at Vanish and Reckitt and all the things related to brand experience. One of the things I love doing is getting to know the person behind the microphone. And my favorite question to ask everyone that comes on the show is, has there been an experience of your past that defines and makes up who you are today?
Wow, that's philosophical. I love it. You ever think about that? Yeah, I mean, I think if I look back, I couldn't hear for a portion of my childhood. So I really enjoyed in that time observing how people interacted with the world around them. I guess it's sort of a habit that sort of stuck, and I suppose it provides you with a slightly different perspective and potentially an empathy of how people are kind of interacting with products, the world around them, how they're using things. And I suppose observing that just makes you start to think about how you could better that space, that world around people. And it's just kind of stuck with me, I think.
Interesting. If you don't mind me asking, like, what happened? What was going on at that point in time?
No, I mean, I think I was about the age of 4, maybe 5. So yeah. And just had a ear condition that meant I undiagnosed for quite some time, and just meant that I couldn't hear for a bit of time, which was actually kind of fixed quite quickly with a fairly straightforward procedure.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, it was a solid 12 months, I think. Wow. And I know it sounds mad to think of that as a memory, but I think it's one of those things that are quite formative. They kind of,
definitely.
As I said, they're kind of sticky.
definitely formative. And I mean, you read and you hear about people that have a one sense that is unavailable to them for whatever reason, right? And for a period of time, and that it can essentially, your other senses can heighten. And I can't help but think about the fact that you went into product design at one point and engineering and all the things that you're doing now. I wonder if there isn't some element of your childhood experience of having heightened senses, other senses than other people, that you see things differently.
Quite possibly. I still have a terrible sense of taste, though, honestly.
Okay, maybe it didn't help at all of them. Yeah,
maybe that's something to do with COVID. I don't know.
I love that. Well, what advice would you give your younger self if you're starting this journey all over again?
Wow. How old's my younger self? Teenager or something? I don't know.
Sure. You pick the age. It's okay.
So I was really, really at school age. I love resistant materials, which I think is workshop or wood shop in the US.
Okay. Yeah.
Guessing. But I guess my advice would be that creativity is more than wood shop. It's a true $2 trillion industry. It has more than 50 million jobs worldwide. So I guess keep building stuff and don't worry about not understanding what Shakespeare's metaphors might possibly have meant. I still don't know. My English literature was the bane of my life at that time.
I think Shakespeare was just the rap artist of his time. And I think it gets more interesting if you think of him like that.
But, I hope so.
Well, what topic do you think marketers need to be learning about more, or it could be something that you're learning about yourself?
So I think it's for all of us, but creativity for that sort of omnichannel world. I know omnichannel is probably a bit overused, but I think that omnichannel marketing space is something that is still very emergent. We're still learning, and I think is a really exciting area to learn more in. I read a book quite recently. It's called The X Experience by Brian Solis, and I know he's quite big in digital experience in the US, and the way he explains it to me, even though it was written sort of, I think probably 5 or 10 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
it's still fascinating. It's still super resonant. And it just goes to show how fast omnichannel marketing has to move to keep up. So I think, I think that's probably a key topic for marketers, really, to remain relevant.
I love it. Well, is there, on a personal level, you talked about headphones earlier. Are there brands, companies, or causes that you follow or you think other people should be taking notice of?
Yeah, I mean, I think in my wider sphere, there are companies like Vinted and Depop. I mean, I'm guessing they exist in the US as well, but they're really rethinking the model of garment ownership. We've also got companies like Oxwash here in the UK who are rethinking the way of cleaning and the model that sits behind that. So taking it out of home, using NASA technologies to kind of clean garments, it's incredible. But also the experience that sits around it is super engaging. So they're doing, honestly, brilliant work on building new platforms, new technologies, and building really great relationships with their brand communities around the space of fashion. So that's kind of in my wider sphere, and there's certainly people that I take notice of and I'm inspired by.
Interesting. I haven't heard of them, so I'll have to check them out and link to them. But yeah, that sounds interesting.
I'll send you the links after the call.
Awesome. And then last question for you. What do you think is the largest opportunity or threat facing marketers today?
Okay. I think we'll do one of both.
Okay.
So I think the opportunity really is to develop sustainable innovations. We need a better future. The world needs it. People are actively selecting and deselecting products as a result of sustainability and those credentials brands have in that space. So I think not just that, but putting sustainability at the heart of innovation has been demonstrably a catalyst for business growth. So I think that is a huge opportunity. It's one we are actively looking at for the brand and actively progressing with, as we were talking about linking the purpose for clothes like new and innovating in that space. Massive catalyst for innovation. So,
and I would just add that the week that we're recording this, the World Economic Forum is going on, and I hope that there's that kind of conversation going on there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's a win-win-win. So sustainability is the opportunity. I think the largest threat is probably not acknowledging the shifts in media consumption that's happening around us and not building, frankly, brand love in that changing landscape. So, a lot about what the conversation we had earlier is kind of centered around. So I think that's probably a huge threat to the brand, not innovating with media consumption.
I love that. Well, Nick, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you.
I really loved it. Thank you, Alan. Appreciate it.
Hi, it's Alan again. Marketing Today was created and produced by me with post-production support from Sam Robertson. If you're new to Marketing Today, please feel free to write us a review on iTunes or your favorite listening platform. Don't forget to subscribe on marketingtodaypodcast.com. Tell your friends and colleagues about the show. I love hearing from listeners. You can contact me at marketingtodaypodcast.com. There you'll also find complete show notes and links to what was discussed in the episode today, and you can search our archives. I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today.